Right. Hi, everyone. I'm Vidya. I already introduced myself, and today I'll share with you just my journey on what it's been like incorporating art into my adaptation practice. And I am not at all formally trained as an artist in any way. Art is just a hobby that I've picked up over the past few years. So I practice watercolor painting, urban sketching, and then I also practice dance. And these are just things that I used to do as a personal side hobby. And over the last few months, maybe over the years, I've seen it leak into my professional work, leading to leading to insights that I never expected to glean. And it's just made my adaptation work more stronger and more meaningful. So I'm here to share a little bit about my journey and then some thoughts on how to operationalize that in really building out this field as a whole. Okay, so my adaptation practice is centered in the Lake Michigan shoreline along the state of Illinois. So Chicago, and then some of the smaller communities that are situated on Lake Michigan. And I work for the Illinois Coastal Management Program. So a lot of my work is focused on shoreline management, erosion control, coastal flooding, coastal stormwater management. So that intersection of the land and the ocean, and in this case, the Great Lakes. So this is where I work. And then during the pandemic, pre-pandemic, I used to go out in the field a lot, meet with stakeholders, assist with habitat restoration projects, do data collection. But then during COVID, all of that stopped. And there were several months when I didn't even visit the lakefront, and I completely lost touch with the landscape that I work in. Everything just became things on the internet. I lost my sense of place. And so it was around that time that I started discovering watercolors and watercolor painting as a way to express myself and express my emotions. So one day I was taking a walk by the lake, and I was like, well, what would it be like if I just painted what I saw? So I just painted what I saw along the lakefront. That was the bench that I sat on. I just tried to copy some of the colors that I was seeing. I tried to copy the way the sunlight falls on the ground. It was just an activity where it helped me be more mindful. It helped me stay grounded with just all of the uncertainty that was going on. So this became more of a habit. Almost every day I started taking walks, and then each day I would draw or paint something that I saw. There was a couple of days when I was snowed in, so then I would just pull up pictures that I'd taken previously, and then I would just copy those pictures onto paper and start figuring out the colors and just playing with the different patterns that I was seeing. And it was just a way to stay grounded when, everything was super cold and there was nothing to do. So this is an example of a one day when everything was just completely iced over. I tried to draw the ice crystals that I was seeing and the way the sunlight was playing off of the ice crystals, and then the skyline that I could see from where I live right now. And then as time passed by, my work matured a little bit more. I started being more minimalistic and tried to capture the essence of what I was seeing with less drawing, less colors, just doing more with less, I guess, was something that I started to do. And then as I became more confident, I also started observing people and watching people. What are they doing on the lakefront? How are they accessing the lake? Who are they bringing with them? How are they, how are they interacting with their pets? And how do these pets interact with these landscapes that I'm technically responsible for managing? And then it's been fun to go out, especially when the sun is setting. There's just so many beautiful colors. And sometimes I feel like my iPhone doesn't capture those colors perfectly, but I feel like my paints can. So I try to make it a point of painting the sunsets whenever I'm able to go out and take a walk around then. And then I told you the other hobby that I have is dance. So I practice dance pretty regularly, and I really love contemporary and Broadway musical styles. And a couple of months ago, I was learning a choreography for a performance, and this choreography was all about flowers and vines and just growing into nature, celebrating nature. And this particular step, we were all pretending to be vines, and we had to like rise from the ground and really grow into our full selves. And then after that, we kind of conglomerated in the center and then moved off to the end of the stage to throw our essences out and like plant seeds of new beginnings. And I felt like if there's any dance step that I would use to describe the work that I do, it would be this one. I think of myself as somebody who likes to bring people together, to seed new ideas, and then throw those ideas into the world. And then I use that as a way to grow myself and just become a better individual, as well as become a better adaptation practitioner. So I found this performance very powerful and very meaningful to my own self and my own growth journey. So over time, through practicing dance and urban sketching, I realized that I was much more connected to my values and motivations. I was able to articulate them clearly. I was able to define goals for myself, who I am as a person, and how that shapes the work that I do. And then because I was going out and observing the lakefront and drawing, putting it down on paper, I became much better at observing changes. And so I started being able to articulate a more personal connection with climate change and the impacts of climate in the areas that I live, work, and play in. And I know that we've learned a lot about Indigenous worldviews through ASAP webinars and the importance of having your worldview. And I feel like through art, I've developed this entirely new worldview and a completely different way of knowing that's based on instinct and intuition. And when I connect feelings and emotions to colors and patterns, I'm able to connect dots that I've never been able to connect before. And because of that, I'm able to generate more powerful insights in my own work as an adaptation practitioner. And to me, this is also a way of decolonizing ways by which we perceive and relate to climate change, because it's more than just data. It's more than just like reports and fact sheets. There's just so many other ways of understanding this phenomenon that we're all trying to adapt to. And then finally, it's helped me slow down and consume climate change information more intentionally, more mindfully, trying to figure out how it connects to larger systems of privilege, power, and oppression, and how it relates to the work that we do, this whole idea of balancing urgency with meaning. A lot of those concepts have fallen into place in my head. So then I started becoming curious. I was like, well, I'm so passionate about this. Who else is doing this type of work? And I found this really awesome project called the Portable Memories and Rising Seas project. So I'll show you what they have. I think you all would really like it. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and then I will share my web browser so that we can all look at it together. Okay, so you should be seeing my web browser. Can someone confirm that?
Yes, thanks, Vidya.
Okay. And then I am going to play a clip that one of the artists said. If someone can confirm that they can hear something within the first 5 seconds, that would be appreciated.
Hi, I'm Laurencia Strauss.
And I'm Lisa Belaski. We're the 50/50 Art Collective. We hope you will.
Did anyone hear that?
I did. Yes. Sorry, maybe you didn't hear me.
Okay. All right. So I will play this full clip so you can hear more about the artists talking about the work that they're doing to capture portable memories in the context of Rising Seas.
Want to be part of this project, Portable Memories in Rising Seas. The project is a space to consider the relationship between sea level rise and memory.
As the climate changes, the places we know are changing. And so we've been wondering, how will we remember these places and who we've been in relationship to them? Could the act of remembering lead to a sense of action? We're hoping that seeing and participating in the project leads to a greater sense of connection with others across the globe as we come to realize that everyone and every place is being impacted by the climate crisis.
Yeah, that's right. And this project works to build community and to turn grief into action by remembering together and by expressing through art our memories and hopes for the places we call home.
It's really easy to participate. We invite you to engage with the whole project through the links on this page. You can watch the 2 short films as inspiration for you to contribute your own reflection. You can do this right now on your phone or do it on a computer later.
Use the online drawing tool to doodle, make marks, draw, or write. Any response is really okay. Then send the file to us and we'll include your drawing in the next iterations of the project. Portable Memories is growing as it travels from place to place, and we really thank you for being a part of it.
All right, so hopefully you all heard what they were saying. I was so drawn to this idea of taking into account grief and constructing memories to document that grief and using that as a source of information about the impacts of rising seas. It was so powerful. And then a couple of months ago, they held a webinar where they made all the participants watch a movie. And then while watching the movie, they asked us to think about these questions. They asked us to think about how we're affected by the climate crisis, what places we want to keep in our heads, how do we relate to our homes and how our homes are being impacted as the planet warms. And then they also asked us to think about how memory is a form of resistance. And then finally, how can we transform our grief about climate change into action? So this movie that we watched was about this man who was trying to build his house as the waters rose. And I'm not going to play this film because you need to be in the right mindset. It does trigger feelings of very acute grief. But this man was trying to save his house by building it up higher and higher, but the floodwaters kept rising. And so we all finished watching that film and we had a lot of grief. We were all experiencing a lot of emotions. And at that point, they actually asked us to create drawings as a way to process our emotions and respond to the film. So this is one example of a drawing that somebody created. It's nothing fancy. They were like, you don't have to share your drawing with anyone. It can just be whatever you're thinking, whatever you're feeling, just draw that as a way to commemorate what you just experienced through the film. So here, someone just drew a boat and a moon and like waves forming. And so ultimately what they did was they collected all of these different images that people drew and created out of it. So I'll just show you what they did. And most of these images are really simple. People just responded to the same concept, but in different ways. So you can see some people were very abstract, others were more practical. But through this activity, they've now collected a whole series of pictures and drawings that depict how people are perceiving and reacting to what's going on around us. So that was something that I was really inspired by. And so as a response to that, I decided to run my own training, not really a training, but like run my own session at the ASAP network meeting. Well, before that, I have to say, I also discovered this resource, or it's a website, but it's also a movement. And this movement is called Liberating Structures. And the idea of liberating structures is that right now, the way we all work together are conventional structures for how we bring people together, how we work together, typically tend to stifle inclusion and engagement. I think we all know that, and that's why we even have a JEDI committee as part of ASAP. So liberating structures is a mechanism that introduces tiny shifts in how we meet and how we relate to each other. And the goal is to put power into everyone's hands, not just in the hands of experts. And so liberating structures teaches people how to distribute control so that participants can shape the direction of projects, of presentations, of meetings as the action unfolds. And so that got me thinking, how can we liberate ourselves from these conventional structures of thinking and documenting climate adaptation? So I challenged myself to present at the ASAP network meeting and run a session on using art as a way to liberate how we process climate information and how we communicate climate information with each other. So I'll share some of the exercises that I did with the participants at the network meeting, just to give you a sense of the activities that I tried to run. So one activity that I found was, thanks, Rachel. One activity that I ran was we took climate graphs that are out there and tried to use drawing and colors as a way to overlay climate graphs onto our everyday lives. And this, I drew inspiration from a classroom of students in Maine, I believe, who actually did this activity. So in this picture, you can see like the really bold squiggly line at the base of, I wonder if there's like a marker. Yeah, maybe I'll use this. So this really bold squiggly line, the kids took, this came from an actual climate graph, but then they built out a line around that graph. It was just a way for them to take this abstract scientific information and connect it to something that they know. This is another kid this kid actually used two graphs that they found to construct two different things, right? So what's going on in the ocean and then what's going on in the land. And again, just very creative ways for them to bring climate change into focus into their own lives. This one I particularly enjoyed. How do I erase all of this? Ugh. Okay. Yeah, this one I particularly enjoyed because it doesn't require any fancy art skills. They found a line graph and then they connected it to a beverage that they drink every morning. So I thought that was also very creative. And so through this activity, we were able to, oh yeah, this is one that I did. I really love fall foliage. So I just took the Greenland ice mass variation graph and drew leaves around it. And then I started coloring it with the fall foliage colors that I really enjoy seeing outside my window. Yeah, so this activity led us to reflect more about how this work really brings climate into focus in the context of our own everyday lives. Because otherwise, if you see a graph like this, you'll see it, you'll make sense of it, but you'll forget it later on. But this is a more powerful way of internalizing what it actually means for us. And then for me, I'm constantly overwhelmed by all of the information out there. We're a field that is rich in information. There's so many reports, so many articles, blog posts. There's just so much to read and consume. And sometimes I get overwhelmed by consuming all of that. So through this session, I challenged participants to look through the images in the IPCC report. There were a lot of really good images, but it's often hard to consume those images along with the text, along with all of the information. So what we did was we just looked at the images and created a pattern library out of what we saw. So for example, I saw these solar panels and I was so drawn to those little dots. So I just copied that into my pattern library. With these crops, I really liked the changing colors, like the contrast of the green and the brown. So that's something I just collected in my library. I love this landscape and how the pinks blend into purples. So I drew that. So we just looked at images, collected patterns, collected shapes and colors that we liked. And then that helped. And then I also invited people to look at the captions and read those captions. And what this does is when you start paying more attention to these pictures, we're also evoking our own sense of curiosity. So when I'm drawing this train and these lines, it makes me wonder, okay, why are there so many people on this platform? Where are they trying to get to? Is there enough space in the train for them? And so that prompted me to read more about the transit story that accompanied this picture. And so now that story is actually staying in my head because there was that sense of curiosity that came out of my work drawing and collecting these patterns. So to me, this is like a more creative way to take notes. Sometimes we read reports, we write things down, but what would it be like if we took visual notes? And this is an example of that. And it also prompts us to think about whether our field has a color. Does the adaptation field have a shape? Does it have a pattern? What does that shape or pattern mean for the growth and direction of this field? So there are more powerful questions that can come out of an exercise like this that you can reflect on. And then this is one that I didn't have time to run in that session, but this is something that I do for myself whenever I feel like I can't get anything done, there's too much bureaucracy and our progress is too slow. I just pick up and draw these mason jars. And then I don't even think about it. I just let myself doodle into the mason jars. Whatever patterns, whatever shapes and colors come to mind, I put them in the mason jar. And then I go back and ascribe meaning to what I put. So here I just doodle leaves. But when I thought about it, I noticed that all the leaves are, going in the upward direction. So to me, that symbolizes growth, which is something that I'm really passionate about, my own growth and in the growth of this field. And then here I just drew like staphylococcus shaped patterns. And I realized that to me, this is all about joining groups for connection, which is why I really like participating in ASAP. I like seeking out like-minded people. I like being around people who challenge me, who motivate me to think better and higher and more creatively. And then this one, I just drew random patterns, but I realized that what I was actually getting at is this idea of making connections when connections are not apparent. And for me, that's why I enjoy art most. It makes my mind connect dots that I never would have connected otherwise. I'm also very passionate about breaking barriers for myself and then also for other people. So I had drawn these random ladder-like patterns, but I realized that there is a deeper meaning that comes out of it for me. And then I also really enjoy optimism. And so I just drew like the sun, but to me, it's like, yeah, I do want to spark hope in other people. I want to be optimistic. I want to help people. So for me, that's what it represents for my aspirations. So anyway, I talked about all this with Rachel and Brianna and Sharon, but one day Brianna and Sharon cornered me and they were like, okay, Vidya, all of this is very pretty and profound and all of that, but how can we make this tangible? What actions are needed to monitor our progress? How do we operationalize all of this? How do we make this real? And at the time I was like, but you know what? Art is supposed to be intangible where, not everything can be measured. This doesn't have to be measured, it's fine. But the more they prompted me, the more I realized that it is important to measure. It is important to operationalize. It is important to hold ourselves accountable, because if we don't, then we'll just kind of ignore it and forget about it. So I came up with some ideas and I'll present those ideas and then get your feedback on those ideas. So as adaptation practitioners, I feel like we do many things. We practice, of course. Some of us do research. Some of us do trainings. We train other people. We train other practitioners. We train students. Pretty much all of us communicate to share information, exchange knowledge. And then, at least in ASAP, we're all committed to building and growing this field. So ways by which we can measure what's being done and hold ourselves accountable for practice. For me, I would like to know about how many adaptation planners are using art as a medium of engaging with their affected stakeholders. So for example, that Portable Memories with Rising Seas project, that is an example of planners actually using art to engage Miami residents and Key West residents in depicting their grief associated with land loss. So for me, that's an example of accountability in actual practice. With research, for me, accountability would mean that scientists use Native and Indigenous art as equal and valid sources of information for studying climate adaptation. So the knowledge that they gain through Native and Indigenous artwork should be held on par with the data and graphs that are being shared and communicated. And one example of that is this gorgeous drawing by an Indigenous artist based in Alberta, I believe. Her name is Leah Dohue. I have her name in the next slide, so I will do the proper attribution then. But she does a lot of different paintings, and each painting is incredibly rich. If it's like her website has these paintings and you zoom into each part of the painting, and each part of the painting tells its own story. So this artwork has so much rich information, so much knowledge about how people use their land, how their land use is affected by changing climate, that to me, it's very surprising that art like this is just not a part of, is not considered equal and valid information as the so-called empirical data that we like to collect and use. So as far as accountability for training, I think that a good way to measure it is to see whether art-based coursework is made available to students through their graduate or undergraduate programs, and whether art-based coursework is made available through adaptation-related professional development offerings. And then with communication, I think this is something that just pertains to the field universally. I think of things like PowerPoint presentations and reports and white papers, and then especially paywall journal articles. To me, these are colonized modes of communication. And so can we measure communication through alternate mediums? So can we measure climate communication through dance? I know people actually knit tapestries that showcase how the planet has warmed over the years in their specific locations. Can we communicate more through drawings, through observations? Indigenous traditions promote sharing knowledge about the land and about climate through generational stories, just stories and fables passed from one generation to the other. Can we consider those forms as valid means of climate communication? And then for field building and the work that ASAP does, can ASAP webinars be revamped to seek and encourage the artistic expression of its members? And by that, I mean not just webinars like Kale, where they showcase artwork being done as an example of community-led adaptation work, but can we have webinars where it's just somebody doing a choreographed dance about climate change? And can that webinar be held on par with another webinar, like talking about data that's used in the water utilities sector? Or like, can we have a webinar where somebody is sharing a story, like a fireside story or a fable, and treat that as an equivalent field building webinar as equivalent as like the other types of traditional webinars where we're just sharing information through slides and reports. So this is the artwork. The artist's name is Leah Dorian. She's a Métis artist based in Saskatchewan. I just wanted to bring this up because this webinar is being recorded and it's important to make sure that there's proper attribution. So I'll leave it at this slide to see what your thoughts are and what your feedback is. This is how I propose that we measure and track progress and hold ourselves accountable, but really looking forward to hearing your thoughts and feedback.